He thought he won. He believed the papers signed, the passwords revoked, and the polite security escort marked the end. The office door closed behind her without protest. A nod, no scene, no second glance. But what happens when the woman they dismiss with practiced HR language is the one who designed the skeleton of the entire institution? This betrayal does not burn, it chills. It does not escalate, it tightens. She does not scream, she listens. She does not return to destroy, she returns to reveal what they chose not to see. That structure, once broken, remembers who broke it. Watching the story to the end is not optional, it is required. The reckoning is already in motion. The story begins with a fracture disguised as procedure. In a windowless room, with the blinds already turned and the folder already prepared, a long-serving female executive is dismissed. It is abrupt, but couched in HR formalities. They thank her for her service. They clarify it is not personal. That, of course, is the first lie. She does not protest. There is no appeal. She signs where they ask her to sign, nods once, and walks out without looking back. To the untrained eye, this resignation is quiet compliance. But beneath the surface, the moment defines everything. She is not obsolete. She is essential. Though removed from the room, she is still present in every layer of the company's architecture. The servers speak her language. The protocols follow her patterns. The systems hum because she designed them to. They have erased her from visibility, but not from influence. The institution has mistaken absence for disappearance. As Act 2 unfolds, the conflict does not erupt, it escalates in gradients. Her access is severed, but her knowledge is not. Off-site logs begin surfacing, irregular audits, redundant vendor codes, documents that appear legitimate until they are examined with the eye of someone who once controlled them. The fraud does not announce itself. It hides in plain sight, protected by the very workflows she once enforced. Then a consultant is introduced. Their mandate is to streamline, but their presence signals erasure. Institutional knowledge is being overwritten with strategic forgetfulness. The consultant is not a villain, but a tool, one that believes ignorance is efficiency. And still, she says nothing. She watches as policies are rewritten, as history is wiped clean, until one evening, in the quiet solitude of her own system backups, she uncovers the scale. The fraud is not isolated, it is structural. Shell companies siphoning funds, payrolls padded with relatives, compliance officers signing blind. This is no longer a betrayal of her, but of the institution itself. At this midpoint, she does not rage, she recalibrates. She moves from passive witness to active architect. She begins to insert anomalies, quiet disruptions designed to draw attention. This is not retaliation, it is redirection. When the legal department notices irregularities and begins escalating threats, subtle legal letters, backdated accusations, they reveal what she needed to confirm. They see her as a threat. Their fear is proof. It sharpens her resolve. The pressure does not shake her, it confirms that her silence is working. In Act 3, the execution is precise. Exposure is not a media blast, it is a sequence of controlled disclosures. Files drop in synchronized intervals. Forensic trails appear in internal audits. Time-stamped backups begin circulating just ahead of scheduled meetings. Finally, in a boardroom no one expects her to enter, she appears, not as an accuser, but as a mirror. The board is presented not with drama, but with data. She does not speak in anger, she presents in logic. The corruption is not an allegation, it is a system of records. And then the structure breaks. The CFO is removed. The consultant is dismissed. The company staggers and the board does something no one predicted. They ask her to return. Not to resume her old role, but to rebuild what was lost. She accepts, but not unconditionally. The terms are hers: governance over systems, autonomy over oversight, internal integrity protected in writing. This is not about revenge, it is about reconstruction. The final image is quiet, deliberate. A structure stands, rebuilt, reinforced. Maybe it is a bridge, maybe a server room glowing in orderly precision. Maybe it's a cactus, blooming quietly in a neglected corner of her office. The metaphor is architectural. What was dismantled in arrogance has been rebuilt with intent. The system still runs, but now it knows who built it. At the center of this narrative is a woman defined not by what she says, but by what she refuses to show. She is the silent architect, an institutional memory housed in human form. Her presence is meticulous, deliberate, and nearly invisible by design. Precision is her defining trait, not spectacle, not intellectual bravado, but a form of quiet mastery grounded in thoroughness. She is the type of individual who understands the value of restraint, not as a survival tactic, but as a long-term strategy. At the story's beginning, she is loyal, almost to a fault. Competent without requiring recognition, she has spent years underappreciated, her systems relied upon, but her contributions overlooked. She does not complain, she listens. And when she is dismissed, she does not protest. She absorbs the blow with silence. Not because she is powerless, but because she understands that noise is rarely useful. In the middle of the narrative, her role begins to shift. Distance becomes her vantage point. She observes not to react, but to understand, mapping networks of failure, watching who benefits from what, and calculating the fault lines before anyone even realizes they exist. Her silence becomes diagnostic, her repression a form of clarity. When she does act, it is not explosive, it is precise. By the story's end, she is no longer a quiet employee. She is a surgical presence. Her assertiveness is not performative, it is structural. She exposes rot with the calm of someone who knows where every line was drawn and how each one was crossed. She does not reclaim her position for validation. She reclaims the institution because she is the only one qualified to restore its integrity. Her emotional palette is subdued, but never blank. Anger exists, but it is never voiced. It is metabolized into discipline. Control becomes her dominant mode, and repression, often pathologized in others, is here deployed as a weapon. She does not vent, she builds. Around her, a cast of functional contrasts sharpen her character's outline. The boss, an MBA-grade careerist, represents the kind of systemic arrogance that sees only performance metrics and fails to grasp foundational depth. He initiates the betrayal not maliciously, but with sterile detachment. He fires her without insight, assuming silence equals submission. His flaw is not cruelty, but ignorance. He misunderstands her restraint as weakness, and in doing so, becomes the unwitting catalyst of his own undoing. More dangerous is the operational villain, most likely a CFO or equivalent, whose corruption is masked by layers of procedural legitimacy. This character is not flamboyant, but methodical, using vendor contracts, shell corporations, and familial ties to embed fraud deep within the organization's framework. What makes this antagonist effective is not just theft, but the calculated use of institutional blind spots. They believe long exposure breeds immunity. They assume the structure is too complex to trace, and that complicity has become culture. The consultant, meanwhile, is not evil, but destructive. Brought in to modernize, streamline, and optimize, they are a blunt instrument disguised as innovation. Their presence signals a purge, not of inefficiency, but of memory. They speak in buzzwords and erase nuance. They replace system knowledge with presentation decks and flatten everything into frameworks. In doing so, they amplify the threat, making it easier for the decay to spread unchecked. They are not villains, but accelerants. Finally, standing quietly apart from the professional chaos is the emotional anchor, a spouse, a partner, or possibly a close friend. This character serves no direct narrative function in terms of plot mechanics, but they offer essential moral contrast. In brief but meaningful moments, they remind the protagonist of value beyond structure, of humanity untouched by betrayal. Their role is to hold space, not to interfere. They are not there to push, but to remind her that even precision needs a reason. These characters orbit the protagonist to underscore what she is and is not. They misread her, underestimate her, discard her, and in doing so, they allow her true nature to emerge, not in defiance, but in design. Her arc is not about transformation. It is about revelation. She was always this person. They simply never looked closely enough to see it. At its core, this story is an indictment of how institutions treat their most loyal.
It explores the quiet brutality of betrayal that does not arrive through screaming matches or public humiliations, but through procedural emails, closed-door conversations, and pre-signed forms. Loyalty here is met not with recognition, but with erasure, an erasure so bureaucratic it pretends to be objective. The protagonist has given the institution years of integrity, careful labor, and foundational trust, only to be dismissed without ceremony.
The emotional is not essential. It is structural, permanent, and silent. Within that silence lies the second thematic engine, the illusion of power. Titles, roles, and official authority appeared to confer control, but the narrative steadily dismantles that perception. Power does not sit in the C-suite or flow through performance reports. It lives in the architecture. Systems, workflows, security protocols, all of which were designed and maintained by someone now deemed disposable. The true authority in this world belongs not to those who manage outcomes, but to those who understand how the outcomes are produced. In this space, invisibility becomes an asset. The protagonist has been ignored because she engineered her work to be seamless. That invisibility, once a liability, becomes her shield and sword. She moves unnoticed because they never truly saw her in the first place. Her erasure allows her access. Her quiet enables her strategy. Rather than announce her return, she embeds herself into the failure lines, using their blindness as opportunity. The story uses this to critique institutional rot, not as a product of malice, but of cultivated blindness. The problem is not that no one noticed, it is that no one wanted to. The institution does not fail because of a single bad actor. It fails because it rewards comfort over clarity, loyalty over scrutiny, and surface metrics over systemic truth. What allows the protagonist to cut through this rot is not emotional explosion, but emotional discipline. She never screams. She never retaliates impulsively. Instead, she absorbs, endures, prepares. Her restraint is surgical. Her precision is the inverse of spectacle. In this story, emotional intelligence is not defined by expressiveness, but by containment. Rage is too loud. Grief is too soft. She chooses stillness. Because in a decaying institution, silence is not weakness, it is strategy. These themes cohere into a singular ideological core. Integrity is not passive, it is architectural. And when betrayed, it does not collapse, it recalculates. The style of this narrative is defined by its discipline. Minimalism is not a flourish here, it is a principle. Every line carries structural weight. There are no redundancies, no wasted metaphors, no exposition disguised as dialogue. The writing does not explain, it observes. It trusts the viewer to feel what is withheld, not what is stated. The language operates like the protagonist herself, lean, quiet, exact. The story unfolds entirely through her interior perspective, but even that is constrained. Her thoughts are not indulgent, they are diagnostic. The plot is not propelled by external action, but by internal recalibration, subtle shifts in perception that change the stakes without ever raising the voice. Emotion is present, but never expressed in conventional terms. The tone remains cold, controlled, and forensic. Each emotional beat is earned not by what is revealed, but by what is withheld. There is no catharsis, only escalation through quiet realization. The narrative rhythm reinforces this restraint, with specific phrases recurring like system commands. They do not know. I nodded once. Just watch. These refrains are not decorative. They function as emotional anchors, grounding the audience in the protagonist's psychological landscape without requiring exposition. The pacing mimics code execution, precise, silent, inevitable. The script does not accelerate to meet audience expectation. It tightens like a pressure seal, daring the viewer to breathe slower, think sharper. When dialogue occurs, it is stripped to its function. Every word is architecture. There are no conversations, only calculations dressed as speech. This linguistic austerity is not aesthetic. It mirrors the protagonist's worldview. When institutions fail, when language has been used to disguise betrayal, speech becomes unreliable. She trusts systems, patterns, evidence, not sentiment. The style must reflect that. Even visual metaphors are deliberate and spare. Nothing ornamental survives. The prose, like the character, has endured institutional rut and come out leaner, sharper, harder to erase.
The result is a story that does not seek approval or sympathy. It asks only for attention and punishes the viewer who fails to give it. In this world, language is not used to feel, it is used to execute. The symbolism in this narrative operates with the same discipline as the protagonist herself, measured, structural, and intentional. At its core are systems and frameworks, bridges, architecture, internal circuits. These are not mere backdrops, they are metaphors for both the protagonist's identity and the institution's vulnerability. She is the architect of these systems, the quiet force behind their integrity.
When they remove her, they believe the structure will stand, but she knows where the weight is distributed, where the faults lie, where pressure will crack foundations that once held firm. The very systems she once designed become the tools she now uses to dismantle. In parallel, the motif of plants, specifically a cactus, functions as an emblem of quiet survival. It is not decorative, it is chosen for its properties, minimal needs, long life, and complete self-reliance. It asks for nothing, thrives in silence, and outlives more fragile blooms. The cactus may sit in a corner of her home or office, barely noticed, yet entirely intentional. Like her, it endures without acknowledgement. It does not require attention to survive. It requires space, time, and memory. That endurance, that resistance to external validation mirrors her psychological armor. Finally, backups and storage devices recur throughout the story as symbols of preparation and unspoken control. Drives, encrypted folders, time-stamped audit trails. These are not just tools. They represent a philosophy. Nothing is improvised and nothing is forgotten. She may be dismissed, but her archives remain untouched. These digital repositories carry more than data. They carry proof, continuity, and leverage. They are her silent witnesses. When the moment comes, she does not scramble for evidence. She opens a folder, selects a file, and everything is already in place. These symbols, systems, cactus, storage, form a thematic triad: structural control, quiet resilience, and strategic foresight. They do not draw attention to themselves. They do not explain their presence. They simply remain, embedded in the environment, echoing the protagonist's own presence, overlooked, underestimated, and quietly indispensable. The narrative's architecture demands a plot that rewards intelligence, foresight, and restraint. Every element must be seeded early, not in broad strokes, but with surgical precision. The protagonist's system access, her legal fluency, her archive of documentation, all of these must be introduced subtly, integrated into routine scenes long before they become weapons. A flash drive tucked into a drawer, a quiet email forwarded to a personal account, a comment about compliance frameworks during an early meeting. Nothing exists for spectacle. Every tool she uses in the third act was earned in the first. This story rejects coincidence. The protagonist never stumbles onto a solution. She does not win by accident or due to a villain's error. She wins because she knew the terrain before they changed the map. Her advantage is embedded, not performative. Her power lies in what others overlooked, and her method is informed anticipation. The audience must feel that each move she makes was calculated long before the betrayal occurred. This is a story where intelligence isn't shown, it's proven. Exposition, then, cannot be filler. It must serve as weapon. Any piece of information the audience receives must have functional value. Technical details, legal clauses, financial anomalies, each is a clue, a brick in a structure that will only reveal its full shape at the climax. When she speaks, it is not to explain, it is to confirm. The payoff lies in clarity, not surprise. What was obscure becomes obvious, not because the script tells the audience, but because it trusts them to see the design emerge in time. This narrative is not a puzzle, it is a blueprint, and she is the only one who knows where the pressure points lie. Beneath this tightly constructed design lies a commitment to psychological realism that elevates the entire narrative. The protagonist's emotional state is never heightened for drama, never exaggerated for sympathy. Her restraint is not a stylistic choice, it is a survival strategy. This is not fantasy, it is an emotional compression rooted in real-world adaptation. She does not triumph because she is chosen or exceptional. She endures because she understands what betrayal feels like when it arrives in procedural form. Her arc is not about emotional revelation, it is about calibration under pressure. Every decision is earned, every silence has weight. Surrounding her is a credible world of corruption that mirrors contemporary corporate decay. Vendor laundering through shell entities, inflated compliance metrics that exist only to meet audit quotas, consultancy firms brought in to whitewash internal failures. These are not narrative inventions. They are real tactics. The story draws from verifiable mechanisms of fraud, embedding the conflict in plausible economic and institutional logic. The stakes are not metaphorical, they are operational.
Even the technical landscape is rendered with lived-in precision. Admin roles are not generic. They carry weight, with legacy access hierarchies, backup redundancy systems, and segmented permissions that reflect the protagonist's embedded knowledge. She does not hack her way in. She understands the order of things because she built it. The interface between character and infrastructure must feel seamless. There is no learning curve, no exposition to catch her up. The systems, like her, are quiet, layered, and resilient. This level of fidelity ensures the story remains grounded, even as its tension tightens. It is not asking the audience to believe in coincidence or cinematic heroism. It is inviting them to witness competence in its most distilled and necessary form. This narrative operates at a level of precision rarely attempted and even more rarely sustained. Every moment is constructed with intentional weight. Every line, every silence, every cutaway serves the structure. There is no excess, no improvisation, no filler. The story moves with the discipline of its protagonist, deliberate, economical, exact. The psychological depth is not worn on the surface, it is engineered into the design. Her silence is never emptiness, it is architecture. It holds memory, strategy, and purpose. She does not disappear, she recedes to a vantage point. Her restraint is not passive, it is generative. The story recognizes that real betrayal is not theatrical. It is quiet, bureaucratic, and devastatingly routine. It comes through closed doors, procedural emails, and polite phrases that nullify years of contribution. Thematic weight accrues not through speeches, but through structure. Betrayal is procedural. Recovery is architectural. What elevates the script beyond its genre is its cinematic readiness. The narrative functions like a sealed system under compression, cool, quiet, and relentlessly calibrated. Each pressure point is planted early and paid off with timing, not coincidence. It does not build toward a single explosion, but toward a series of locked moments that only make sense in full once the final image is revealed. It is a story that could exist in silence, and in many ways, should. Think the lives of others for its psychological compression, Michael Clayton for its procedural rot, but reimagined in the circuitry of modern corporate systems through the understated defiance of a woman no one remembered to fear. This is not her revenge. This is her re-entry into the institution, into the system, into herself. She was never truly gone. She simply waited for the structure to expose its own fault lines. And when it did, she was already standing at the switch.